Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad that Dr. Martin Stopford is able to join us here today. He came all the way from London, and I hear that he doesn't like to make long-haul flights nowadays, but he made an exception for Singapore, so we're all very privileged that he's able to spend a week here with us. Today, I wanted to also point out that we have folded our SMW programming together with the Singapore Maritime Research Conference that's also taking place today. So we have many members of the community from the R&D community who have joined us. Today we also have leaders from government, industry, academia, all here. Some of you may have read, some of you who have done maritime studies previously may have read the textbook Maritime Economics by Dr. Martin Stopford. You may be reading the 3rd edition, and I hear that he's now working on the 4th edition. We hope to give you some inspiration today for you as you write the next edition of this important book. We have heard over the past few days the different challenges that the maritime sector is facing today. First, we are navigating an evolving global landscape where trade fundamentals and shipping patterns are being redefined. In addition, the maritime sector is also dealing with many concurrent transformations, particularly in terms of decarbonization and digitalization, just to name 2 of them. Against this backdrop, I wanted to point out and recall that, Martin, in 2024, you have pointed out that the maritime sector is now in the 3rd phase of its super cycle, the 3rd super cycle for the maritime sector. But the world is quite different today. What phase of the super cycle do you think we are in now? Has this big backdrop changed anything? And what factors do you see that are more structural rather than cyclical about this super cycle? Martin, please.
Oh, well, thank you, WK. And could I just say how honored I feel to be here and to see so many friendly faces and to be looked after so well by you guys. It's been a real pleasure to be here again. And of course I sat here and listened to the Minister's state comments, and I'm in awe at the comprehensiveness of the way that the Singapore authorities and the government are tackling this great issue that lies ahead of us. And I plead guilty to having used the word supercycle because it's true. And of course, you guys in Singapore, you remember the things you say before, and I'm sort of called to now to justify what I was saying. And I think the way there's an enormous plan of work being set out. We've just heard it, and the question really, I would say, is what can an economist like myself add to this in the context of the super cycle? And I think what I'm going to suggest is that we should be looking at a 3rd dimension in the whole process, and that is time. We have perhaps 3 buzzwords that I would suggest, and which I hope I'm going to be able to follow up in some of our discussions this morning. The first is D for dynamics. The whole point about the super cycle is that things don't move in straight lines, and so we need to be prepared for that dynamic change. And that's never been more clear than it is today, because with mass media, opinions, attitudes, confidence move almost daily. And I think this is something we have to be aware of. The second element in this is the dynamics, is the timeline. There are some times when you can do things and achieve things, and other times when actually you have to just, prepare, and do things that don't, that perhaps the technology isn't quite there to complete the task. So you have to just take it one step at a time. And the third thing is speed. How fast can you move ahead? And if I could just to round off and to this comment and to pick up your question about the super cycle, I don't think in retrospect the super cycle is a different cycle. Shipping has shipping cycles are famous. They're always thought to be 7 years, and in fact over since 1970 we've had about 9 cycles. Some lasted a bit more than others, and so the average cycle was about 7 years. They come and go, but in a sense where the super cycle comes in is that it's rather like in the old days when I was a young man. Sometimes you could buy a sports car with a supercharger, and the thing about the supercharger is that you were motoring along and you put your foot down and suddenly the car lurches, shoots forward. Well, I think in the last 15, 20 years, we've been driving on a motorway, and it's been okay to sit down and put your foot on the throttle. Now we're moving into a period where we've come off the motorway onto windy roads, and this is very dangerous with a supercharger because you put your foot down and suddenly you're struggling to get the car around a corner which you didn't quite expect to be there. And so I think the point of inflection that we are now at, WK, is the point where we've come off the motorway. We've got a complicated map to follow, a road map to get somewhere. We're working against a deadline, a timeline, but we also have a very powerful car and engine which we have to control so that as the bends in the road come up unexpectedly, we get round them safely, and that's where I see we are today with all these issues.
Thank you very much, Martin. I really like how you've added these 3 new dimensions: dynamics, timeline, and steam, to how we think about the current issues. Now that we have gotten off the expressway and we are trying to navigate these windy roads, I wanted to ask you, what trends or what things do you think we should expect to see along these windy roads, and what are the opportunities and risks that the maritime sector will face?
Well, that's, this is a great issue at the moment. As we've come off the motorway, we've picked, in the last perhaps 50 years since globalization started, we've picked a lot of the low-hanging fruit. I think the world's grown wealthy, we've been able to open up new materials and so forth, and the whole process was fueled literally by one of the most wonderful gifts that mankind has ever had, which is crude oil. I mean, it's concentrated energy. Crude oil is the sum of all millions of years of collecting sunlight, putting it into geology, creating a product which is absolutely stuffed with energy, and which is wonderful. You can pump it around the place, you put it on a ship. Before you had crude oil, you needed 10 or 20 people in the engine room sometimes on the very big ships just to stoke the boilers. With oil, it's quick, it's easy, and it's very powerful. And I think the first big point, I think, on this this new bendy road we're on is the fact that the great power source, oil, is no longer totally acceptable. We're having to move into a new era where we, as the minister said, you're preparing to use green fuels. But green fuels you don't get for $2 a barrel by drilling a hole in the ground and letting it come out. Green fuel, you have to do all the work that geology did previously to synthesize materials into a fuel that you can use. And so that fuel is going to involve much more work, and it's going to be much more expensive. And so as we move forwards, I would say on this this second issue, we need to think very hard about the resources and the careful use of resources. And that brings me back to the whole question of information, which is another area that the Minister covered in great detail. So, you know, we need the knowledge and the information to manage our way along these windy roads much more carefully than we have done in the past.
These are indeed very important priorities for the sector, how to understand and work with new fuels, how to collect and build that knowledge and information so that we can do it well. Do you think this is something that it's an important area that we need to work together on? How would you advise us to collaborate, bring in expertise from industry, from academia and government? How should all the different parties work together to help us realize the vision?
Well, I suppose in many ways, WK, we're used to managing with not very much information, because on the motorway you didn't really need it. You can settle back and buzz along. But let me give you an example. I mean, containers are perhaps the dominant force in shipping today, and you're absolutely at the lead there. Well, I've just been updating the chapter on containers in my book, and we still, when I look at the performance of the container industry, we're still relying on container lifts. When we look at the statistics of how many containers are moving, the actual hard facts that we've got are the container lifts in ports. And maybe some trade. When I was at Clarkson Research, we started to pull together tonnage statistics, but that's based on customs data. It's not based on what's actually in the containers. It's just an estimate of the amount of traffic that, the amount of cargo that goes through customs of the sort that is containerized. And there's about 2 billion tons of it today. So, and just before I get to the punchline on this, when containerization started, one of the nightmares of the container industry was that containerization would become commoditized, because they had, in the old days, the liner companies, they made their money by they had a pricing book where you looked up the commodity in the pricing book, and you charged things that you thought you could charge a lot of freight on, you charged a lot of money on, and things that you couldn't, like sort of bulky materials, you charged low freight. So you use price differentiation to differentiate. Now, what has happened is that the worst fear of the cargo liners has come true. Containers are now a commodity, but and we don't actually have any information other than, as analysts, the cargo that's lifted globally, the number of containers that are lifted. But in ports and customs organizations, you do actually have a source of information about what is in every container. The one source that you definitely, the one person that definitely knows what, where a container is on a ship, how much it weighs, and what's in it, is the port operator. And if you get together with the customs, you've got the bill of lading, then it should be possible today to classify, to collect data about what is in the containers, how much they weigh, where they're stowed on the ship. And if you had that information, you can start to put artificial intelligence to work on it to do things like, first of all, come up with a price discrimination system so that you can, as a port, for example, you can start to fast track the high value containers which are there on a much higher freight rate and generate more revenue both for the port and for the shipping line. If you've got the data, you can do that. If all you know is that it's a box, you can't do that. The second thing is that if you want to start, tramping containers a little bit more, then you need to be very careful when you're stowing the cargo that you get the containers in the place on the ship where they're most accessible for the ports that you're going to visit afterwards. And that, Maersk and people like that are doing prioritization systems on containers, but if you had a comprehensive system that you could use AI to analyze, then you can really start to manage the cargo loading schedules and so forth in more detail. And I guess what I'm saying in this example is that at the moment, perhaps the information that cranes are gathering and that shipping companies with bills of lading have at their hand and the invoices is being thrown away. It's just not used. It's like when I went to Clarkson's, there was lots of data lying around on the floor that the brokers, because after half an hour the brokers don't want the information, but give them another, but if you collect it, you suddenly find, if you collect it every week, 20 years later, you've got this minutely detailed information that helps you to understand what's really going on. And so that's just one example. And I don't know whether my analysis is correct. Maybe you're going to turn around and say, no, we're doing that. But that's a suggestion of how many parts of the business could work together. It would be a big challenge, though, to do it globally.
Thanks very much, Martin. Actually, that provides a convenient segue for me to make a pitch for Oceans X, which MPA launched yesterday. So that there's a new platform that we created so that data that currently resides only with port operators or government or shipping companies, etc., can flow seamlessly and securely through a marketplace, and then everybody can make use of the data to innovate and serve their customers better. So that's the objective that we have. I know we are running out of time, and there are very good questions coming in from the audience. This is one that has been upvoted, so I have to pose this to Martin. If you had to pick one specific development in the maritime industry that you have your eyes on, which would it be?
One specific
development. Actually, I would say you could think of it as if the industry needed to focus on one or two things at the moment, which do you think it would be?
Well, I suppose, I started out as a shipbuilder, and I think my heart's still with the shipbuilding industry. It's the world's toughest business. Without diverting too much, but McKinsey produced an analysis a couple of years ago where they looked at the product runs and the number of variants on the product by different manufacturing industries. And on this chart, at one extreme, you have someone like Apple producing iPhones, and they have one iPhone and they produce 1 million of them. You can engineer it. Whereas at the other extent of this graph, you've got the shipbuilders, where a shipbuilder maybe has to do 8 or 10 different types of ships, big companies, and you maybe only get orders for 2 or 3 at a time. And so the shipyards are really, really challenged to refine designs and to establish standards. And I think that the thing that I would be looking at as a change so much is the ability to start to really design onboard systems which are fully integrated, get to grips with the electrical system in a new way, get the onboard communications going in the same way they did with motor cars 40 years ago. You get rid of wires and you start to create a platform. And I think if you can do that, you can move on to all sorts of different things, like using people much more effectively on the ship. And I think that's the change which hasn't quite happened, but I think is in process now.
The next question that's quite popular is asking for your bold prediction of the maritime industry in the next 10 years. Would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Oh, sorry.
Your bold prediction. What do you predict what the maritime industry will look like in the next 10 years?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you know, I thought that question was for you. Well, I think that anybody who makes a bold prediction now is going down the wrong road. On my introductory comments, the third one of those the items was the timeline, and I think that we've now reached a point where a lot of technology is sort of on the drawing board, about to be launched, but there's not that much that the shipping industry can do at the moment. And so my view is that the way to deal with the unpredictability of this move off the motorway onto windy roads is to focus on today's business. And if I was focusing on today's business, I would do the following things. First of all, you would look at try to batten down the hatches, get the business in good shape, make sure you've got the cash flows that you need to move the business forward. Secondly, you develop a very clear vision, because you're going to have to take your ship forward in difficult weather. You need people to be motivated, exactly as you're doing here in Singapore. And you need to know that sometimes things won't be good, sentiment won't be good, but you need them to be committed. And the third thing you need to do is develop people who have two things. First of all, they have professional skills, teams of people working together, but secondly, they know your business. And one of the things I think is a very good discipline when you can't rush in and do the full technology of the sorts that the minister was describing and which you're involved with here, is you carry out retrofitting studies. And I think that you look very carefully, if you, in a shipping company, you study and get teams of people studying how you can retrofit your existing ships to improve them, then you do two things. First of all, you really get a close understanding of the technical capabilities of the ships you're operating. Secondly, you become much more familiar with the things you really need to get built into the next generation of ships you build. And thirdly, you're building a team of people who have a really hands-on understanding of what is going on at sea. And that takes you forward to the final bee in my bonnet. I don't like the word seafarers. I think the people at sea are employees of the company, and we really need to move forward on these bendy roads with a team which includes everybody onshore and at sea, and that we have a free movement of people as much as we can within the safety of seafaring. And because we have ships that will be better built by the shipbuilders, we'll be able to put younger people, say young chief engineers, if it was possible, onto the ship. And already people like Maersk are doing that. And they would have the support of the communications, the very good onboard systems. So it frees you up. It creates it takes you into the new dynamic world that you're going to have to manage.
There are really lots of questions for you, actually, Martin. I have to apologize, I can't air every single question because there are just too many. But building on that, and I really like the point you made about how we should think about seafarers, not as seafarers, but as members of employees of the company, performing specific functions. And there is a question here about how ships are evolving in more sophisticated ways, fuels are more complex and risky to handle. Rules and regulations are more complex today. Can you describe who will be the seafarers of tomorrow?
Well, I think that the minister's, the photograph, do you know, I can't remember the name of, but it's a perfect example. An engineer goes in cold and is managing the ships. I really think getting everybody to sea for a bit and the ability to rotate and create environments on. After all, we've all learnt to work from home during COVID, and you know, being on a ship is I'm not really qualified to say as I built ships, but I've never actually been to sea much. So I'll leave it to you guys to fill in the spaces here, you know.
Okay, thanks, Martin. There's another upvoted question. Actually, it goes back to where we started. I'll pose it to you to see whether you wanted to spend a bit more time to elaborate on it. So, do current geopolitical shifts, especially US-China dynamics, alter traditional shipping cycles, or are we still observing a normal cycle?
So the question is, do the dual fuel ships change things? Is that right?
No, it's about the geopolitical shifts.
Oh, the geopolitical situation.
Does it put us in a different cycle?
Well, you know, geopolitics has been with us for thousands of years, and I really think, as I look back over the cycles, and you know, the things that are going on today are pretty dramatic, but they are emphasized by media much more. I mean, in the 1980s, John Fredrickson and Lucas Hadjianu were running ships up the Gulf with no insurance and getting hit by, you know, they proved that you can shoot a VLCC with an Exocet and it doesn't quite bounce off, but it doesn't sink the ship, you know. I think we're very much more sensitive today about these things than we were in those days. And one of the very good things is that we're much more conscious of the position with the crews, because during the 80s, the industry was under great financial pressure and just took on the cheapest crews they could get. Today that situation's changed, and that's set us up for a different way to deal with. Geopolitics has become more difficult, but I think we've discussed before that the move of the critical mass of shipping from the Atlantic into the east of Suez area is very important. And I do hope on this geopolitical issue, I think if the Iran problem can just be sorted out, then we really, Western Asia is a tremendous area for maritime development. It's going back to the heartland of maritime economies. And so I think, you know, the great bonus, if this war can get sorted out, and if in some way the Gulf situation could stabilize, it's a terrific, then the future would, the industry's foot would be on the supercharger. We would shoot forwards on the trade front, you know. So I think this is a very fascinating time, and with great potential.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but that was a really engaging session. I think I have a few takeaways. Number one, I think we should always think of issues with a historical perspective. Understanding where we are today is not complete if we don't know how we got here. I think number two, it is important to pay attention to people. Invest in people, not just that, but also we have to rethink, break our old models and mindsets about how we think about people. I hope we have an important takeaway here about how we think about seafarers in particular. And finally, I really liked what you said about steam and momentum. We really need to build on the momentum that we have so that we can be supercharged and head towards the future. So with that, I invite everybody to put your hands together to give a warm round of applause to thank Dr. Martin Stopford.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Mr. Ang and Dr. Stopford.